Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone. Authorities in the borough of Hanover, Pennsylvania say that a 47-year-old woman is facing multiple charges following a disgusting recent incident which left workers at a local convenience store quite literally dealing with a shitty situation. The whole thing unfolded on the afternoon of April 7th when the woman in question, later identified as Crystal Faith Goss, drove to the Royal Farms convenience store on the 100 block of Carlisle Street. After parking her SUV and going inside, the 47-year-old apparently headed straight for the business's walk-in beer fridge. According to a police report, Goss was caught on surveillance video as she pushed some cases of alcoholic beverages back on one of the shelves. That's when she allegedly pulled down her pants and defecated on the same shelf before walking out and leaving. The situation wasn't brought to the attention of police until the following day, but thanks to the camera footage, it wasn't difficult to identify Goss. She was arrested and has now been charged with several offenses, including open lewdness, criminal mischief, and disorderly conduct that created a hazardous and physically offensive condition. Employees estimated she damaged about $80 worth of products during the bizarre illegal pooping incident. Unfortunately, it's not at all clear why Goss allegedly did what she did, though as an added layer of irony, according to local news outlets, the 47-year-old is the director of food and nutrition for the local school district. Presumably, part of that job is knowing about things like food safety and hygiene, something which Goss evidently ignored when she decided to use that walk-in fridge as her own personal bathroom. Authorities in the city of Fort Worth, Texas, say that they are investigating a truly horrific case this week after they were alerted about a disturbing social media post and discovered that the situation was even darker than they had imagined. The whole thing began shortly before 1:30 a.m. on April 18th when Fort Worth police received an anonymous 911 call. The caller stated that they had just received a very alarming Snapchat message, which had been sent to them and several of their friends. It was an image of a woman lying on the ground covered in what appeared to be blood. The caller was able to identify the sender as 23-year-old Alexander Taylor Valdez and pointed police to his address on the 9900 block of Farmers Branch Street. It quickly became clear that the tip was legit when officers went out to the home. Valdez answered the door holding a Bible and with visible blood on his face, neck, chest, torso, hands, and feet. Before the officers could even begin to process what they were seeing, Valdez walked out of the house and sat down, telling them, quote, "It was an exorcism." When asked about the blood, he replied, quote, "I was doing witchcraft to kill my mom." The 23-year-old went on to explain that his mother was dead inside, something which police quickly confirmed. His 58-year-old mother, Teresita Sason, was in the master bedroom and had suffered clear trauma to her face and upper body. Sadly, Teresita wasn't the only victim, though. The family dog had also been killed and was lying nearby. Officers also recovered the alleged murder weapon, a broken jewelry box that was also covered in blood and which had hair wedged into it. Valdez was arrested immediately. However, so far, not much else is available about the disturbing incident. Despite his apparent confession at the scene, the 23-year-old reportedly refused to speak with police further once he was taken into custody. He has now been charged with murder and is currently being held on a $750,000 bond. Authorities in the city of Wilmington, North Carolina, say that a local man is facing murder charges this week after the body of his girlfriend was found under incredibly disturbing circumstances inside her apartment. The whole thing began on April 22nd when police received a request to conduct a welfare check at a unit at the One Midtown Apartments. Neighbors of 31-year-old Holly Petty said that they'd noticed a foul odor coming from inside her place and that they were worried about her safety. When an unidentified person went into the residence, they encountered something awful. There was blood in one of the rooms there, and what appeared to be a body was wrapped in blankets in the shower. When officers arrived at the scene, they confirmed the grisly discovery. Sadly, the body belonged to Holly. She had been stabbed to death, and it was clear from the level of decomposition that her remains had been there for several days before they were found. As police were processing the scene, Holly's boyfriend, 31-year-old Michael Lavelle, came back to the residence. As soon as he spotted police, he attempted to run. However, officers recognized him despite his attempts to change change his appearance. Lavelle was stabbing himself with a knife in a ditch when police caught up to him and had to be tased before he could be safely taken into custody. He was transported to a local hospital where he was treated for serious injuries, though it's expected he will survive. Lavelle has now been charged with first-degree murder, as well as resist, delay, obstruct. Unfortunately, so far, basically no additional details have been released about the chilling case, so nothing is available about an alleged motive or what might have happened in the lead-up to the crime. The situation is still developing. Authorities in Bay County, Florida say that a local woman was recently arrested in connection with a disturbing and totally unhinged plot after she allegedly impersonated a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officer to kidnap the wife of her former boyfriend. According to a social media post released by the Bay County Sheriff's Office this week, the whole thing began sometime on April 10th when 52-year-old LaTrance Battle showed up at the hotel chain where the unidentified female victim worked, dressed in a black t-shirt with the word ICE printed on it and carrying a handheld radio. She proceeded to flash a sheriff's office business card at the woman and told her that she had to leave with her immediately. The terrified victim followed Battle's orders, later saying that she believed she was genuinely being detained because she is in the process of becoming a legal U.S. citizen. However, after getting in the car with Battle, she started to notice that things were off. As the pair began driving, Battle began talking about the woman's husband out of nowhere. She told her that she would, quote, suffer the consequences for his actions, and when the woman tried to call her lawyer, Battle allegedly snatched her phone from her hands. The victim's suspicions that something wasn't right were all but confirmed a short time later, when instead of driving to the sheriff's office like she claimed, Battle reportedly took them to a Panama City Beach apartment complex. As Battle was distracted digging through the trunk of her car, the woman seized her opportunity and ran to a passerby for help. After alerting police, the woman also got on the phone with her husband, who had some even more alarming information for her. Upon hearing what had happened and the description of the kidnapper, he said it sounded a lot like his ex-girlfriend. It turned out he was correct. Battle was tracked down the following day by police in the community of Fountain and was arrested. At the time, she was apparently getting ready to flee to Alabama. She has now been charged with felony kidnapping, robbery by sudden snatching, impersonating a law enforcement officer during the commission of a felony, and felony violation of probation. While it's not clear exactly why Battle tried to kidnap her ex's wife or what she planned to do with her once they got to that apartment complex, apparently this is not the first time she's done something like this. According to reports, this same ex-boyfriend had a restraining order against her because 2 years earlier she had shown up at his workplace and attacked him. At the time of this recording, she remains in custody. Authorities in Thurston County, Washington say that a former pastor and convicted sex offender is facing several new charges this week, following the extremely disturbing murder of a local elderly woman who he worked for as a handyman. The investigation began on April 4th when concerned family members of 82-year-old Marcia Norman reported her missing. Loved ones said that they were worried about Marcia because they hadn't been able to reach her in several days. When they went over to her house in the city of Tenino, it looked like she had left in a hurry. Plates and dishes were half cleaned and left out, which was unusual. What was even more unusual was the fact that both of Marcia's vehicles were still parked on her driveway, even though there was no sign of her anywhere. It didn't take long for police to turn their attention towards a particular person of interest, a 47-year-old man named Jeffrey Ziz. Ziz had once been a pastor. However, recently he had been working for Marcia as a handyman. The 47-year-old was also said to be a family friend, and crucially, he was also the last person to see Marcia before her disappearance. He'd had dinner with her on April 1st, 3 days before she was reported missing. When questioned, Ziz confirmed that he'd eaten with Marcia that evening, but claimed he'd left afterwards and spent the rest of the night at home. It appears police initially believed this, until they found license plate reader data and surveillance footage which showed that the 47-year-old had gone back to Marcia's place multiple times in the early morning hours of April 2nd. Around this time, they also learned something else that caught their attention. According to those close to Marcia, in the days after her disappearance, Jeffrey Ziz had spent a good chunk of time demolishing and rebuilding a shed on her property. On April 9th, authorities went back out to the residence, this time accompanied by cadaver dogs. Sure enough, they could smell something underneath a concrete slab in the newly built shed. Ground-penetrating radar provided further evidence that something was buried there, and when the area was dug up, everyone's worst fears were confirmed. Marcia's body was in a roughly 18-inch deep grave beneath the concrete. An autopsy revealed more awful details about what had happened. Thurston County Police now allege that Marcia was killed with a pneumatic nail gun. Speaking about the situation, the county coroner said it was the worst case he'd seen in his career, adding in part, quote, "Her onset from injury to death was not instant. It was hours." By this time, Jeffrey Ziz apparently knew that his alibi had fallen apart and had reportedly fled the state, though was quickly arrested in Missoula, Montana on unrelated charges. However, one final, deeply unsettling clue would allow them to arrest him in connection with Marcia's case as well. It happened when police conducted a search of Ziz's home and discovered a letter that laid out a plan for burglary and sexual assault that was eerily similar to what had happened to Marcia Norman. In the 5-page letter, Ziz referred to the victim as his customer. On April 20th, Ziz was officially booked for first-degree murder, first-degree kidnapping, and unlawful disposal of human remains. He currently remains in custody. A Florida man became the latest poster boy for the phrase "don't drink and drive" last week when he brazenly offered police a sip of his alcoholic beverage during the middle of a car chase. The whole thing began on the afternoon of April 19th when the Highlands County Sheriff's Office received a call about a theft at a local convenience store. Moments earlier, a man, later identified as 39-year-old Richard Christopher Smith, had allegedly stolen several items, including alcohol, from the Spring Lake Market before walking out. Officers arrived at the scene just in time to see Smith driving off in a black minivan, prompting them to begin a pursuit. However, they had no idea just how ridiculous the situation would get.
Stop! Stop! I'm gonna give you a drink, that's it! He's drinking some, looked like a beer or something. He just drove by, he's back towards, Lakeview.
The drink that Smith was offering was not, in fact, a beer. It was a Kettle One vodka spritzer. Nonetheless, the footage is pretty astonishing. It appears that police were likewise left pretty dumbfounded, writing in a Facebook post about the incident this week, quote, "We don't know if he was expecting us to just say cheers and let him go or what." Of course, police did not let him go, and instead the chase continued for several more minutes. During that time, spike strips were deployed, and all 4 of the tires on Smith's vehicle were flattened. This brought him to a stop, though not before he allegedly attempted to ram 2 patrol cars. Even after this, the 39-year-old appeared completely unfazed. As you can see, he got out of his minivan and lit up a cigarette as he attempted to walk away from the scene. Smith continued to ignore orders from deputies right up until he was tased in the middle of the road and placed in handcuffs. Even after losing his freedom, the 39-year-old apparently did not lose his sense of humor, though, and continued to make a joke out of the whole thing.
Put your hands behind your back! A lot of stupid right now.
You guys had fun, all right?
Smith is now facing a slew of charges, including aggravated assault on a law enforcement officer, battery on a law enforcement officer, resisting arrest, DUI, refusal to submit to a DUI test, and petty theft. Representatives from both the Ohio and Pennsylvania state police say that they are investigating a complex and upsetting case this week after a Michigan man was killed earlier this month in a dramatic and violent encounter with officers. The whole thing began on the afternoon of April 4th when the Ohio State Patrol were called about a single vehicle rollover crash that had happened on an eastbound section of interstate. Officers were told that the driver, later identified as 30-year-old Deshaun Leith, had gotten out of the damaged car, though they didn't know what condition he was in. When an officer from the State Patrol spotted Leith at the side of the highway, he initially believed that he was dealing with a simple, albeit serious, collision. However, it wasn't long before the whole thing transformed into something else entirely. In harrowing body cam footage released to the public this week, you can hear that as the officer exits the vehicle, Leith is already in an apparent state of distress and anger. He appears to be ranting about religion and immediately gets aggressive with the officer. Though the 30-year-old initially jogs away, it isn't long before he comes running back, and that's when things spiral out of control.
Hey, you gotta go down!
You ain't That's Jesus! That's Jesus!
Get down on the ground!
As you just saw, the officer deployed his taser, but it looks like the device was ineffective. Things continue to escalate as Leith punches the officer and knocks him to the ground, making threats and repeatedly telling him he's stronger than him. As bad as this was, unfortunately, the situation still wasn't over. Right after this, Leith jumped behind the wheel of the officer's patrol car and sped off. In additional police-recorded dashcam footage, Leith can be seen dangerously speeding down the highway across the state line into Pennsylvania. During this time, he continues rambling and muttering to himself about religion and Jesus, weaving in and out of traffic. Leith crashed about 11 minutes later when he hit a concrete barrier, causing him to roll the stolen patrol car into a section of woods. Though he survived the crash, he allegedly attacked officers again when they responded to this second scene. That's when he was shot and killed. The exact circumstances of this largely remain a mystery at this time, as unlike with the first attack, it appears body cam leading up to the fatal shooting has not been released. All we really know is that the situation is still being investigated, and that several troopers with the Pennsylvania State Police, who were involved in that second incident, have been placed on temporary administrative leave. Likewise, the circumstances leading up to the initial crash are also being investigated. So far, no explanation has been given for Leith's aggressive and violent behavior, so we don't know if this was drugs, mental health issues, or something else entirely. Leith himself has become a controversial figure online in the aftermath of the situation. You have many people pointing to his criminal past, suggesting that he was a violent and dangerous person, while those who knew him, as well as his supporters, say he was a community mentor who was in the process of turning his life around. As always, it seems that the truth is likely much more complicated than either of these narratives. According to reports, the 30-year-old had previously been incarcerated for a number of home invasions, but following his release, he began working with nonprofits and was especially involved in community outreach programs targeted towards at-risk youth. At the time of this recording, the situation is still developing. People across Canada have been left stunned and in mourning this week after 11 people were killed and dozens of others were injured in a horrifying vehicle ramming attack that took place at what was supposed to be a fun community celebration. The awful situation unfolded on the evening of April 26th at the Lapu Lapu Day Festival in Vancouver, British Columbia. That day, thousands of people had gathered for the event, which is held annually to celebrate the city's large and thriving Filipino community. For almost the entire duration, things went as planned. The festival was primarily held out of John Oliver Secondary School, but the surrounding block was also shut down. Things like food trucks and other attractions had been set up primarily behind the building, and thousands had come out to enjoy and take part in the celebration. However, at around 8 p.m., as the festival was coming to a close and organizers began cleaning up, things took a tragic turn. That's when out of nowhere, a black Audi SUV started driving down East 43rd Avenue near Fraser Street, right in that area behind the main building. The vehicle was traveling at a high rate of speed and began plowing into the crowds of people who were still there. Those who could ran for their lives, but it seems there was very little warning that something was wrong. As a result, dozens of people were hit during the carnage, with witnesses describing seeing bodies flying everywhere. So far, not much information has been released about how the attack came to an end. However, what we do know is that when the SUV did come to a stop, the driver was pulled from the vehicle and detained by members of the public who had been at the event. The driver has since been identified as a 30-year-old local man named Kaiji Adam Lowe. After arriving at the scene, emergency responders rushed the dozens of victims to several different hospitals in the area. However, sadly, many of them could not be saved. At the time of this recording, 11 people have been confirmed dead, while at least 17 others are still in the hospital suffering from injuries that range in severity. Doctors say that the death toll may still rise. Heartbreakingly, the youngest deceased victim was just 5 years old, while the oldest is 65. Right now, it appears none of their names have been released. As for the suspect and the alleged motive, authorities say that they do not believe this was an act of terror. Rather, they have stated that Lowe had a lengthy history of interactions with police and emergency responders due to severe mental health issues. In fact, it's been reported that family members had called a hospital psychiatric ward just hours before the attack looking for help for him and saying that he was suffering from delusions and paranoia. It's unclear what, if anything, was done with this information. What's especially troubling too is that it seems there were other warning signs of instability and mental health issues in Lowe's home in the months leading up to the tragedy. Last year, in January of 2024, Lowe's older brother Alexander was murdered at a home near Knight Street and East 33rd Avenue. While another local man was arrested and charged in connection with the killing, Lowe had written extensively on social media about how the crime had ripped apart him and his family. Just months later, he went online looking for donations after his mother tried to take her own life due to the grief. All the while, it appears Lowe's own mental health was rapidly deteriorating. The other major aspect to the case being discussed is the fact that Vancouver police chose not to have a large presence or erect heavy barriers ahead of the Lapu-Lapu Festival. In a press conference after the tragedy, they defended that decision, stating that there had been no problems at the festival the previous year, and they had no reason to believe ahead of the celebration that there were any threats to the public. The city's police chief, Steve Ray, said in part, quote, "Last year, there was zero interactions with police at this festival. It was a family-friendly cultural celebration involving kids, and we wanted to maintain that based on that information and that threat assessment. We don't want to cage everybody up at every event in the city of Vancouver." At the time of this recording, Adam Lowe has been charged with 8 counts of second-degree murder, though more charges are expected to follow. The 30-year-old remains in custody. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you'd consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.